Hi everyone, welcome to National Freelancers Day. I'm here with Dan Pink, author of Free Agent Nation and more recently Drive. Hi Dan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Dan, could you tell us how Free Agent Nation came about?
Well, it came about because I found myself in it. This is now 14 years ago, or a little over 14 years ago. I had worked in American politics for a while. After a while, I just couldn't take politics anymore, and I decided, and was complaining to my wife, and she said, well, I think that you really need to work for yourself. And so I decided to do that. And so I started doing that, and I looked around, and I noticed that a lot of other Americans were doing this sort of thing. I decided that I would do a census of Free Agent Nation. So for about a year, I traveled around the U.S. Interviewing people who had made this decision because I was curious about who these people were, what made them tick, why they were doing this.
So that was 14 years ago, and how have you seen things evolve in that time?
What I've seen is actually an intensification of it. If you look at this very analytically, at the time I said, okay, what are the forces driving this? One of them was the changing relationship between individuals and organizations. That is, it used to be, both in the States and in Western Europe, it used to be that there was a social compact of work in which the individual would give the organization loyalty, and the organization would give the individual security. And that bargain is kaput. That bargain no longer exists. It exists maybe slightly more in the UK and in other parts of Europe. That bargain is dead here in the States. And there's a new bargain where people exchange talent for opportunity. And, that was true 14 years ago. I think it's doubly true now. I mean, that was before there was the Great Recession, and before some of these huge companies that we thought were impervious back then have gone out of business. And so I think that it's intensified. So among the forces propelling it, that force is intensified. That is, there isn't long-term job security anymore, not by a long shot. Another factor was technology. And again, this is way back when. Another factor was technology. And the idea here is that in a world where individuals could own the means of production, a laptop computer or any kind of communications and computing equipment, the individuals could own the means of production, so talented people needed organizations less than organizations needed talented people. Go back to today, my God, I mean, that was before there was widespread broadband. That was before YouTube. It was before Twitter. It was before Facebook. It was before social media. So the technology side of it has intensified. And I also think that some of the other social forces have intensified too. People are looking, even now in a dicey economic climate, people are looking for a sense of, greater sense of authenticity and wanting to do something that matters. And so, at least in my view, the forces that were propelling us a decade ago have only intensified.
And in terms of that social contract that you talked about, where do you see that fitting now, if that is completely kaput, at least in the U.S.?
Well, I mean, what I think has happened is the bargain has changed. It used to be a bargain where individuals gave loyalty and got security in return. I think the new bargain is that individuals give talent and they get opportunity in return. And, the opportunity can be money. Opportunity can be the chance to work on interesting things. Opportunity can be the chance to develop some new skills, to work with good people. And, that's a very different bargain because loyalty is something that almost anybody can give if he or she wants. Talent is not necessarily something that everybody can give. And one of the things that's happened on both sides of the Atlantic is a greater increase in inequality. That is, the returns to education, the returns to certain high-level skills have become greater, and the punishment for not having those kinds of skills has also become greater.
So why are free agents a vital cog for the economy?
The economy has become much more efficient, and that's generally a good thing. And one way it's become efficient is in allocating talent. And so today, thanks in part to the Internet, it's much easier to find the exact right talent for the exact right task. In that more efficient labor market, these free agents, these freelancers are hugely important because they allow the absolute best talent to be deployed where it can be used most valuably. And so I think that it helps make the economies more efficient. So the other thing is that more and more people on both sides of the Atlantic are working in this way. It's not as if jobs are going to disappear, but this is becoming more and more a legitimate, very important form of work. And on both sides of the Atlantic, there's still this residual sense that this is an aberration, when in fact it's becoming more and more of a norm. And so more and more people are working in this way. And so I think it's become much more legitimized on both sides of the Atlantic. I think that's important because it needs to be recognized, and we need to make some kind of changes in the public policy to allow people who work like this to lead satisfying, productive lives.
Mm-hmm. And do you think businesses and policymakers are starting to recognize it?
No, I think businesses are. Because they're relying more and more on this stable of talent. And one of the really curious things that's happening in business is that they're realizing, as I was saying before, that today in this much more fluid environment, it's really the case where talented people need organizations less than organizations need talented people. So one of the really interesting changes that I've seen, especially here in the States, is a move toward workplace architectures, workplace policies that are very free agent-like. For instance, there's something that's becoming more popular here in the States called the ROE, the results-only work environment, where people don't have schedules, ROWE, ROE, where people don't have schedules. They show up whenever they want, which is sort of how a freelancer would work. Even short of that, schedules have become much more flexible. There are many more people who are working at home. And so one of the big changes is that in order to attract talent, and again, even in a high unemployment environment where we are right now, there's still a very, very intense battle for talent, is that these companies are realizing if you want to attract great talent, what you have to do is simulate inside of the organization the conditions of what it would be like to work outside that organization. And so even internally inside of companies, they're becoming much more free agent-like, even if people aren't officially free agents, even if they are officially employees of a particular operation. And I mean, a way to look at that, at least here in the States, is that there's a porous border between free agent nation and corporate America. It used to be that there's a high wall between those, and if you went over the wall to the other side, you would never come back. And now it's a much more open border, people going back and forth, and they begin to look more like each other, more migration back and forth.
So, I mean, in this environment, what do you think the role is of the organization going forward if it's all about networked talent working in this free agent way?
I think that's a really important question, and the answer to that is playing itself out. I am not, in the stuff that I've written about, I am not calling for the death of the organization or the death of the job at all. There are legitimate reasons for efficiency, especially for organizations to exist. When there's any kind of economy of scale, then organizations make a huge amount of sense. What I'm suggesting is that the talent that an organization uses, there's going to be some in-house and some external. And that's always been the case. I just think the balance is going to be far more even than it's ever been before. So for an organization might want some dedicated employees, employees who are whose sole job is to work for that organization to do certain and that could be at the very high end, a CEO or CFO or people guiding the strategic direction. You probably want some people who are on the paid staff to maintain certain kinds of operations. But for other sorts of things, for very discrete functions, you might want to go out more broadly to the talent pool and pull in the exact right people for the exact right task. And so organizations, again, are going to be already much more porous. And you see this very much in some of these startup companies, especially the web, social media, mobile phone app startups. I mean, these are places that are startup companies that make a decent amount of money and distribute their product very, very widely. And they have, 10 employees, 12 employees. How are they doing that? Well, they're doing it because they've figured out a way to apportion their talent. They have some people in-house, but a lot of people, a whole network of folks outside. And so I think that's going to become much more of the norm. It's less of an either or, less of a black and white, and more of a gray. That inevitably changes what organizations look like and the way organizations are and the way organizations treat people. And I mean, you see that reflected right now, as I said, in a lot of workplace policies, not only in terms of scheduling policies, but also in terms of employee benefits, where there is a move to essentially give what here in the States is called defined contribution types of programs, where instead of saying, here are your health benefits, here's your pension, here is some other kinds of perks, they say, listen, here's a menu of choices, here's a little bit of money, you decide. The other big thing that's happened here, both inside of companies and outside of companies, is that more and more risk is now on the shoulders of individuals. Risk for taking care of their pensions, risk for taking care of their health insurance, risk for managing their career. There's been a shift in the risk to more individual shoulders, and smart individuals are saying, hey, wait a second, if I'm going to bear the risk, then I want the reward.
Yeah. And in your latest book, Drive, you say we should toss the word management in the bin. Why is that?
We tend to take management, the whole concept, too seriously. We think that, and we need to really scrutinize it, we think that management is something that's always been here since the dawn of civilization, the dawn of humankind. And that's not true at all. Management is not anything that emanated from nature. It's not some divine gift of God. Management it's just something that some guy invented. Management's a technology. That's a very good way to look at it. Management's a technology. It's a technology for the 1850s. And you know, there are very few 1850s technologies we use today. And so management is a technology that's designed to get compliance. That's what it's for. It's designed to get people to do what you want them to do the way you want them to do it. And we still need some compliance out there in the way that organizations and teams deal with individuals. But more and more, we need engagement. We want people to be engaged, and that's true whether they're in-house or external. And the way that human beings engage is not by being managed. The way that human beings engage is not by being controlled. That is not how human beings engage. They engage by getting there under their own steam. And so the technology for engagement isn't management, but is self-direction. And you can't, and so we have to use the appropriate technology to get the result that we want. You cannot manage people into engagement. They can only get there by having some sovereignty over what they do, how they do it, where they do it, when they do it. And that's another big impetus for this free agent movement, is that people are saying, wait a second, if I'm going to bear all the risk, if I'm not going to have lifetime job security, then I might as well do something the way I want to do it, in a way that I can be engaged. Because I think that the natural human impulse is to control our own lives, to direct our own lives. And more organizations are coming to that conclusion as well, that the way that people engage is through self-direction, and so they have to loosen the ties a little bit, not try to control people even more.
Yeah, indeed. So finally, what would be your top tips for the UK's freelancers?
What's really important is to make a concerted effort to talk to people within your profession. One of the ways that people are finding gigs, one of the ways that people are getting better at what they do is through professional associations, either online, ad hoc, other small groups of people. That is, this idea that someone is a freelancer or a free agent means they're entirely isolated and solo is completely wrong. It's very important to plug yourself into other kinds of networks, whether through social media or whether through face-to-face or ideally both. A lot of times people go out on their own because they're very skilled at a particular profession. They're a great graphic designer, they're a great photographer. But it's also very important that you have the business chops and get some kind of, know that you're also a business person. And if you're not very good at those kinds of things, there are many opportunities to get better at them. There are many people who can mentor you. There are many people who can help you improve those kinds of capabilities. And so you have to wear multiple hats when you're working for yourself. But I find a lot of people, particularly in the creative professions, neglect to wear the business hat. And you're gonna get rained on if you don't wear that business hat.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Dan, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Have a great National Freelance Day, UK.
Thanks very much indeed.
Okay, take care.